We're good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
So whenever you're ready.
It's kind of interesting. I was very fortunate to figure out what I wanted to do as a young person very quickly and early. And I was always fascinated by these perennial questions of what is the good life and how do we live it and how do you become a good person and how does God play into this and how do we worship God? And my own faith was important to me, but also observing around the world that faith wasn't always leading to good things. And so I always loved the sciences and math and the method of being able to test things and find that you were wrong. But I love these philosophical, theological questions. And so in high school, I discovered psychology and said, oh, I can answer the questions I care about that people have been talking about for millennia, but bring this rather new method, the scientific method, to not necessarily answering them, because these are really complex, but just to providing a new type of evidence. And it was just such a good fit and wanted to do that for a lifetime. So my training is in personality and social psychology, and not a lot of people know about that part of psychology, but we're studying kind of the general human species and who are humans. And the personality component of my field is understanding individual differences, the uniquenesses of even particular individual persons and how we change and grow within person. And then the social component is trying to understand how are we all similar and what are the ways our environments, especially our social environment, pretty consistently affect us. And so really trying to understand human behavior, how groups work, how we operate. I'm not a clinician, so not thinking about disease models, but really trying to look at humans generally and thinking about, in my particular subfields, their religious lives and spiritual lives and how they develop strengths and virtues and character strengths to kind of promote a flourishing society. Well, I think all of us are armchair psychologists, right? We all have beliefs about how humans act, what motivates them, why individuals are doing certain things. But the one thing we know is that we're all biased and we all come from particular cultures and backgrounds that shape our views. And we take those beliefs about humans to when we think about God, right? We interpret God through the lens of our humanness, and what we think about other people is often then anthropomorphized or made about God. And so I think psychology of trying to look at humans systematically and understand what happens when you use lots of opinions and collect data and move away from some of those biases we each have as an individual to try to get a fuller, complete picture about how humans operate, how does culture play in, how are there individual differences at play. It helps us to be a little bit more accurate, and that's a really good thing because we don't want to get stuck in one viewpoint that limits the way we think about God, and we want a bigger imagination of the diversity of humans we have in this world and allow us to think about God in those big ways, and that the way God engages me is not necessarily the same way other people experience God. I began this work very early in grad school and was looking around and recognizing that no one was studying patience. We had a lot of these wonderful attributes that we value in Christian communities, but almost all of the religious communities value patience and love and gratitude. But why is it that we weren't studying patience? It seemed at the time, and as I talked to people, The expectation is that if you're patient, you are a doormat, or you aren't actually achieving goals, or you're letting life happen to you. That seems to be the modern notion. And I had done reading in more ancient philosophies and said, that doesn't seem to be what's described here about this virtue. And so a study we did was looking at patience and goal pursuit and measuring and asking people across time at multiple occasions, what goals are you working on? And then tracking those goals and saying, how's it going? Are you working hard at that? How much effort are you exerting? How much meaning do you find from this pursuit in your life? We're curious to look at, if people say they're patient on their goals, does that undermine their performance? Does it actually make them more passive? And it was really cool to see that, in fact, it energized their goal pursuit. That even though we have this inkling that patience leads to passivity, it was actually the opposite. And that people, it seemed instead, were staying regulated and were able to engage with that goal without giving up because they became so disheartened with it and were willing to endure suffering and to wait for the timing that was right, and yet they didn't give up. And so that was a study that was really exciting, and I think is important to our corrective to how we're talking about patience in the church, right? We're all like, oh, don't pray for patience, God will give you suffering. Like, no, this actually is a strength that's essential to our spiritual formation and our moral formation, and actually is useful and doesn't have these negative outcomes that we all anticipate. That was a really fun study, and continue to see that in our work. As I was studying this, I developed some real health problems as a person, something called cyclic vomiting syndrome, which is about as bad as it sounds, and was in grad school and dealing with this. And it made the scientific research so much more important personally of how does one suffer well and not know if or when suffering will end. And really, I think many researchers, you find a deep connection in your own life to the topics you study. And even though you don't wish for those things, it's also recognizing that many people are dealing with intense suffering, whether it be chronic health conditions or consistently having to encounter systemic racism or having mental illness of close loved ones or addictions, or right, we have much pain and suffering and brokenness in this world. And how do we do that well and view that as not a failure of our technology, but instead as an essential component of our spiritual formation and our character formation? And so my own experiences continue to illuminate the importance of this work, and just thinking about this is not just numbers on a page, even though I'm a big numbers nerd, right? But that for every data point we have, there's someone's very real lived experience behind it. And having my own helps me to connect and not forget that these data we bring in are actual real human beings with real life hardships and interpersonal hardships. So, and it keeps you humble. That's hard. There's a lot of things. Like, do we have?
Like 50 grams.
Yeah, I was like, oh. There's a couple things. I mean, I think the thing that most excites me right now is not a particular project, but investing in other people in my field and engaging in training of other scientists to do their science in a way that makes a difference, that allows them to bring who they are to their science, and also is bringing people who haven't always been included in that enterprise into the fold. I think we have a lot of stereotypes about what a good scientist is and saying, no, there's lots of different types of people that are scientists. So I think that gets me really excited, and people who are from different faith traditions than myself, who are from very different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different economic situations. I get excited about the future of what we can discover once we actually engage people who are different from me. And so I think that's exciting. And then as far as projects that really excite me, I'm part of some work right now that is trying to think about more holistically. So I study virtues and virtue development. We have some theory we're developing around how we can actually think about virtues in the constellation of virtues that people are holding and developing in their lives. I think so much we talk about them in one at a time. So we need to talk about patience. Okay, now we're going to talk about gratitude. Like, it's the whole fruit of the Spirit is what we're developing. And we had a recent paper come out where we talk about how patience and courage are really necessary to counterbalance each other. That if you have one without the other, you actually lose the virtue. If you're patient and courageous, you will work for justice and continue to fight for the sake of love. But if you only have patience, that is where things can go awry. And if you only have courage, you become reckless. And so really trying to do research that can show some of those dynamic within-person interplay of these virtues together and how they support each other, I think has been sorely missing, not only scientifically, but I think in the way we practice in the church. We tend to get excited about one thing, and that we really need to be considering holistically what's going on.
Anything else you want to say?
No, I think that's good. Excellent.